At least 7 women would die by his hands. Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of serial killer Paul Runge. Viewer discretion is advised. Paul Runge is a piece of shit, but he was from Oak Forest, Illinois. From a very early age, it was clear that something was wrong with him. His mother died when he was 17, and that kind of just seemed to push him over the edge. The same year his mom died, he kidnapped and raped a 14-year-old girl. He then turned himself in, was convicted of this. He was sentenced to 14 years, but was paroled early in 1994. He was in prison for about 7 years. This was Stacy Frobel. She was good friends with Paul's now wife, a woman named Charlene. Well, she was last seen on January 4th, 1995. She had gone to the home of Paul and his wife. After this, she is never seen again. 2 weeks later, after she'd already been reported missing, a dog finds 2 human legs in the woods. They would later be identified as belonging to Stacy Frobel. I believe the rest of her remains were eventually found, and they determined that she had been killed by blunt force trauma. Later, they discovered that she was struck over the head with a dumbbell by Paul Runge. I don't know where his wife was at this time, because she was her friend. These were his next victims. They were Bosnian sisters who had come to the States to, find the American dream. I don't want to say their names wrong, these 2 women right here, so I'm not going to try saying them. I don't want to butcher their names. These sisters were last seen alive on July 11th, 1995. This is because Paul Runge had put an ad in the paper for house cleaners, and they responded to it. Once they were reported missing, police, I believe, found out that, they had gone to this home responding to an ad. And I believe they actually staked out the couple, but nothing came from it. Police would later learn that the 2 sisters were murdered, dismembered, and thrown in trash bins. In January of 1997, this woman here, and again, I don't want to say her name wrong, well, she had put out an ad selling a home, and they found out later that Paul Runge was one of the people who responded to that ad. And then subsequently, she goes missing. Her body was later found in her home that had been set on fire, and her burned remains were found inside of it. February 1997. Yolanda Gutierrez and Jessica Muniz, Yolanda had put out an ad selling some sports equipment. Paul Runge, later they found out, responded to that ad and went to their apartment where the mother and daughter lived. Their bodies were later found inside the apartment after Paul set it on fire. Yolanda and Jessica both were found with their throats slit, and they had both been raped. They later found out that they were tortured for several hours before they were killed. March of 1997, again, this is a name I don't want to mispronounce. Well, she had put out an ad selling her condominium, and so Paul Runge responds to the ad. And just like the previous victims, she had been found in her burned out apartment. She was murdered prior to the fire, and she had been raped. So I know that the police and the FBI in Chicago, Illinois, because this is where that all happened, they were on to Paul Runge and I guess his wife after the 2 sisters had vanished. And they were also connecting him to the first victim, Stacy. In 1996, the FBI had actually searched the home that he shared with his wife, and also his father lived there too. They took hundreds of pieces of evidence, but it wouldn't be until May of 1997 when they were finally able to put him back in prison because he broke his parole, because they found a weapon in his home. He wasn't supposed to have one. For the next couple of years, they were fighting like hell to keep him in prison. When he was sent to a parole board again, he showed absolutely no remorse for the rape he committed back in the 80s. And that's what this whole, he was back in prison for the parole for that case. Nothing to do with the murders at this point. Now, finally, they were able to take DNA evidence found with the mother and daughter victims, Yolanda and Jessica, and they were able to link his DNA to those murders. So he was finally charged with those murders, and then when they had him, he just confessed to all the other ones. He confessed to 5 more murders, including the ones he was already suspected of committing, of Stacy and the 2 sisters from Bosnia. It's unbelievable that he wasn't arrested or detained or anything after those 2, because, there would be more victims, including a child. He goes on trial for the murder of Yolanda and Jessica, and he is found guilty. There was that DNA evidence that directly connected him to the case, plus he confessed to him. And so Paul Runge was sentenced to death. But in 2011, the state of Illinois, the death penalty was abolished in Illinois. And so his sentence was commuted to life in prison without parole. The rest of the cases he never really went to trial for, even though he has been now connected to all of them. But because he now has life in prison without the possibility of parole literally ever, they didn't want to waste time going through trial after trial just to get the same sentence. Which is kind of a bummer, because that means that several of these victims don't technically get justice, not in their names. But you can still state that the guy who committed all of these murders, and there's a good chance he committed more, that at least he will never be free again. He will never be paroled. He will never be able to hurt any woman ever again. And by the way, with regards to his wife, Charlene, in terms of where she is now, I don't know. I do know that police and the FBI believe that she had played a part in some of these killings. However, she was granted immunity from any of the charges related to this case in order to testify against Paul. So if she was involved, well, she got away with it.